Coming up tonight on Brewed.
So this was something that 5 cities in Bettendorf had to make beer, and now you have it to make bread. Watch this magic trick. I've never done this on the show. You ready? We love to ask brewers, what music are you listening to when you're back there making the beer?
Brewed starts right now.
We are here at the Eastern Iowa Baking Company in its new location, and I tell you where it is, but that's none of your business. You've moved to now this is your home.
Yes.
So there was a place. Rhonda has been on the show before, years and years ago. We went to your old location, and you were making delicious baked goods using craft beer.
Yes.
And you're saying, well, wait a minute. If Rhonda's already been on the show, why are we doing this again? Because you figured out a new way to make baked goods using stuff from local breweries, but not the beer.
Yep.
Please explain to us.
Okay, we use the spent grains from the brewing process. And it's either used for animal feed, or I beg it off the brewers and we turn it into bread.
So many brewers have told us this story, and it's kind of one of the great symbiotic relationships of local breweries, especially out in, more rural areas where they have all this spent grain. They don't know what to do with it. They call a farmer. The farmer is happy to take it off their hands, because we've heard in every single brewery that we've heard this story from, the animals just go crazy for it. They love the spent grain to the point where, they know when it's spent grain day, the animals. We've heard this story time and time again. So spent grain is the material that's used in the brewing process that then is discarded. What characteristics does that grain have that would make it different from other grains?
It provides flavor. There is still some nutritional value to it. But in baked goods, especially in the bread, it gives it kind of a nutty textural thing without actually having nuts. So for somebody who is allergic, you can get that kind of texture, or I won't say flavor. And the beer doesn't really come through. It's more of a textural thing.
Right.
So imagine sort of a whole grain bread, but it's actually spent grains.
The volume when you do a brew day and you've got all that spent grain, I mean, we're talking, it's huge. I've had to work with it where you put it in these massive containers. You're not taking it in that sort of volume.
No. I'm getting a 5-gallon bucket.
Okay.
And actually, I'm either...
So local animals are still able to enjoy the spent grain.
Yeah.
You're just taking a little bit off the top.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. Do spent grains take on different characteristics based on whatever beer it was they were making?
Yes.
So, there's a difference. You have to take that into consideration if it was a spent grain for a stout or an ale or...
It'll depend upon what kind of a bread I produce with it. I tend to go for the ones that are used more with the lagers, with the sourdough.
Okay. And why is that?
It just, it's a little bit lighter. It doesn't have the rye and some of the heavier grains in it that you would maybe get with a stout or something.
Yeah, it hadn't occurred to me until the first time that we met here on the show how similar brewing and baking can be, in that, you find when you go to really good breweries that balance is the most important word. Balance sounds like it's an important word here because you're making sure that whatever you're using, whatever spent grain you're using, plays nicely with whatever else you're putting it in with, yeah?
Well, and too much of the spent grain, you're going to get this heavy, dense, maybe more European style loaf that American consumers don't necessarily look for.
Okay.
But, and the sourdough plays off really well against a lot because it's already quote unquote a fermented product.
Right.
So you're adding another product of the fermentation to that sourdough.
With so much of baking, throughout the hundreds and thousands of years that it's been going on, we owe so much to the way things taste and how good things taste, because back in the olden days, you wanted to make sure that you weren't wasting anything, right? I mean, the reason we have a lot of really cool treats is because they didn't want to waste stuff.
Well, and even going back to the Depression era,
sure,
some of the things that came out of there, that they didn't have certain ingredients, so they had to make do.
Right.
And I mean, sourdough was one of those things that traveled out west They would have a little crock in their covered wagon, and it was replenished on a daily basis, and then turned into biscuits or whatever. Just
And then they
because
got to San Francisco and they still couldn't get enough of it. They had
Right.
to make. They had to make
Okay,
more.
more.
That seems silly. The whole idea of the spent grain not going to waste. And imagine too. You mentioned the Great Depression. Like I can't imagine if the Great Depression is going on that you're throwing anything edible away, right?
I imagine most of those home brewers were feeding their chickens or something with whatever was left.
Right.
And I think most people think of spent grains too as a baked product as a dog biscuit,
Right.
because that's been around for years.
Right.
And
But you're not doing dog biscuits.
We
I'll be
have.
very clear. You have.
we have.
The spent grain bread, how different does it taste depending on what spent grain you're using? What would be the differences? Like how much of a difference is there in the different types of bread?
Again,
Oh, she's gonna cut some off.
this is just kind of. It
Look at that.
Yeah, it looks a little more like a whole grain kind of.
Boy, it sure does.
And then
Okay. Oh, it's still, how is it this warm? Is this just out of the oven?
yep,
All right, spent grain bread. And this is spent grain from
5 cities.
Five
City
Cities.
Brewing.
Okay, in Bettendorf. You don't need to put anything on this bread. You would just have the bread like this. Like, it would be criminal to put butter or anything on this bread.
We do, but
I mean, you could. What am I getting in there? Why is it so? Is it because it's just out of the oven? This is incredible.
it's out of the oven. But and it's also the grains do bring some additional flavor.
A lot of flavor.
Flavor.
Yeah.
Because sourdough bread has its own distinct kind of sour twang.
Uh-huh.
But like I said, now you're adding that maltiness from the spent grains.
And again, it's that balance
Balance.
that is so important in both brewing and baking. Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, this is excellent. Spent grain. Like, I get now when the farmers have told us, oh boy, the animals love the spent grain. I've always kind of understood that. But now having this bread, I really get it. And I'm glad that you're not depriving all of the animals of all the spent grain. You're just taking enough to make
A few loaves of bread.
a few loaves of bread every once in a while. Well, this is just dynamite. If people want spent grain bread, it seems like it would be the perfect thing to have if you're having people over for a couple of beers. The best way to get a hold of you is on your Facebook page.
Preferably, yes.
Eastern Iowa Baking Company. Ask Rhonda about the bread, the crackers, anything else that you're making with the spent grain?
Not currently.
No, it seems like the way you answer that question, that there's something you're thinking about doing, but you're not willing to share it with us this time, which I appreciate, and it gives us an excuse to come back at a later date. Yeah?
Yeah.
Are you still baking with the craft beer? Are you still using like Stats every once in a while, or?
Yep. Give me an excuse to use beer. Yeah.
Yeah, any excuse. Right on. It's Eastern Iowa Baking Company. Rhonda, cheers. Oh, that's wonderful. There's something about coming out of the shower smelling like a gin and tonic, and I'm not somebody that enjoys that gin and tonics, but there's something about smelling like a gin and tonic that appeals to me.